what a terrific turnout from our creative community. Thank you all for being here. So the staff here at the Small Business Program, we're here to support and nurture Austin's entrepreneurial and startup community. You all are the ones that make Austin unique and special, and our creative community is no different. My name is Calder Kamen. I am the Artist Liaison for the Economic Development Department's Small Business Program. I manage our artist business training programs and provide coaching to artists, so consider me your conduit between city resources, national resources. We're here to help, and I want to help you make your passion profitable. Not only is the Small Business Program here to support you, but we also have staff from the Cultural Arts Division and our Music and Entertainment Division in attendance. If you'd like to find out more about Economic Development's artist programs, please visit the table outside in the gallery. We are so glad you could join us for this exciting conversation planned tonight. But before I introduce our speakers, I want to thank our Mayor, City Council, Director of Economic Development, Kevin Johns, and our Assistant Director, Sylnovia Holt-Rabb, who is here with us, for supporting and funding small business programs and events, especially our outreach to our creative community that we know you asked for based on our needs assessment. So be sure to thank your council member. One more bit of housekeeping. Just wanted to let you all know, restrooms, if you exit the gallery, they're just to your left. Also, if you make sure that you fill out our evaluation sheets, we want to hear your feedback. We want to know how we make better programs available to you. And we also have a little prize if you do turn in your evaluation. So now I will turn it over to our esteemed panelists of Big Thinkers. Curator, writer, and our moderator for this evening, Annette Carlozzi. Multimedia sculptor, neon artist, and founder of Ion Art, Sharon Keshishian. She's got a big turnout of support tonight, so awesome. Austin-based muralist, Josef Kristofoletti. And artist, curator, media disruptor, and city council rep for El Paso District 1, Peter Svarzbein. These three Texas artists will share their journey on how they brought massive concepts to fruition in a short presentation. So each of them will present a little bit about their work, and then we will open it up to discussion with our moderator as well as you in the audience. So will you please join me again in welcoming our panel.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak about my work. And Calder, thanks for setting up this program. So I thought I would start with this image from Diego Rivera, one of his great murals that is in Detroit. So this was just a piece that has been a big inspiration to me, and I think when he painted this was a very unusual picture because it's in the tradition of mural art, but it portrays this picture. It's basically showing a factory and all the changes that were going on at the time, including manufacturing and assembly line. So one of the things that I love about mural painting is that it's a very ancient form of art, but it's very relevant still, and I think to be able to kind of sum up what was happening in society at that time, and paint these massive pictures, I found that really inspiring and interesting. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my background, how I got started in mural painting. And I studied painting in school. I got a degree in art. And after I graduated, some friends and I decided to go on a trip around the country, and we got a retired city transit bus from Philadelphia and converted it to run on vegetable oil so that we could travel a bit around the country and do art projects. So we all had different kind of missions on things we wanted to do on this trip. My dream was to paint murals in different places, and we ended up doing a performance, some videos, art installations of different sorts, and it was an interesting time. We just basically would drive around without a plan, aimlessly, and we would just drive into a town at night, fill up on used vegetable oil from the back of some restaurant, and figure out something creative to do in the town, meet people. One of the projects we did is we stayed on a farm in Houston where this guy has taken a kind of an old abandoned rice mill and converted it into an urban farm by making his own dirt and planting trees and vegetable gardens. So I remember we met this guy who lived in the neighborhood, and asked him what was it about Houston that if he what was something that reminded him of Houston, and he said onions, because onions make you cry. So we painted this big onion. And then, this is kind of a detail of a smaller mural that I painted in South Carolina. And at the time I was interested in kind of big ideas, and I had read an article about the Large Hadron Collider, which is this really complicated physics experiment that people have been collaborating on to basically understand where the universe came from. So, that's kind of a big idea. And I did this, I proposed to do a mural of one of their detectors, and this is in Geneva, Switzerland. It's basically an image that shows what a black hole would look like in one of their detectors. And I worked on this project for over the course of a couple of years. Being a nuclear physics laboratory, they had really high security, and I had to get nuclear safety training, so that was interesting. And then, sometimes people ask about my process, how do I work on a large scale, and I just included this little drawing of the previous project. So what I do is I basically start small and kind of scale up the drawing using a grid. And this is some details. This project is when I first moved to Austin. It's been around 6 years ago. There was this abandoned construction site off of 12th Street downtown, and I thought, man, this would be a perfect spot to do some murals on. So I painted this grasshopper, and when I first visited Texas, I remember seeing these grasshoppers that are really brightly colored. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them. They're called, I think they're called painted grasshoppers or something. But anyway, I just thought they were really interesting. And then, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Castle Hill, the graffiti park, which has now become quite a destination for a lot of people. But this was early on. And then I'd travel around and do paint murals for festivals and public art programs as well. One of the projects I'm really proud of, kind of facilitating, is I did this project in collaboration with a couple of artists from Italy. They go by the name of Sten and Lex. And if you guys have been by the Seaholm development downtown, you can see this wall. It's, I believe it's the largest mural in Austin. I think it's around 300 feet long, so. But this was really interesting project to work on, and you know, I got to work with the city because this was a city property, and got to go to a lot of meetings and fill out paperwork.
It's true.
Yeah, that's usually kind of, you know, if you have a big idea, you're gonna have to do some paperwork. It's, that's the way it goes. So, this is another project I did in Panama City, and this was this building is the first movie theater in Panama, and it's kind of a historic building. This is for the Panama Biennial. And also one of the projects I'm currently working on is a large-scale printer that you could attach to the side of a building, and it can just, the same way like a color inkjet printer works in your office. This uses spray cans basically and sprays out little dots of color. So I'm currently working with the architecture research studio at the University of Texas on this with an architect and some engineering students. So really excited about this project because I'll be able to work even larger. So thank you very much.
It's beautiful work. Yeah.
So I think I'm up next. I would like to thank, first I want to thank Calder and the Economic Development Department for making tonight happen. This is really amazing. All right, so my name is Peter Svarzbein. I'm a first-generation Jewish Latino American, born and raised in El Paso, Texas, on the border of the United States and Mexico, and that's really where a lot of my work comes from. My art sort of comes from a place of trying to understand what it means to grow up in that sort of place. We got a laser here, so I'm going to use it. Right here is a picture of El Paso and Juarez. And anybody can tell where one ends and one begins? Maybe, maybe not. So if you're from El Paso, you probably can. If you're not, sometimes it's hard. But this is Mexico over here, and somewhere over here, Texas begins. El Paso is a place that is often misunderstood and misappreciated. This is a map from the 1925 George Kessler Plan, our comprehensive plan, and it talks about El Paso as a center of industry. El Paso is located directly in the middle of the U.S.-Mexico border, and it's the largest binational community in the world. You have over 800,000 people in El Paso and another 1.5 million in Ciudad Juarez, and between those two cities is an economy and a place where everything crosses. To be from El Paso means to be able to cross, from the richest of the rich to the poorest of the poor, and we've always had different reasons for wanting to cross. Right here is a picture of Mandy the Mule. She was the first way that people crossed over the border. In the 1880s, she came around, she'd take a trolley back and forth between El Paso and Juarez, and in 1902, she was retired. She was put on a float with our electric railway, and she was fed the finest carrots in El Paso County, according to the El Paso Herald Post. They had a sash for her. It's kind of amazing. We had a streetcar line up until 1974. At the height of this line, it ran over 500 times a day between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. And it was a tremendous, it wasn't just a symbol of border crossing, it also was a tremendous economic driver. For example, in the 1950s, the highest grossing JCPenney's in the United States was not found in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles, but in downtown El Paso. And the reason why that JCPenney was so popular is because of Mexican nationals coming and taking their hard-earned dollars and pesos and spending it in our city, on the tip of Texas, and coming back home. That line closed in 1974, and the streetcars that used to be there were languishing in the desert. These streetcars were designed by, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or rather he wanted a streetcar that could run in any temperate climate in the United States, and in 1935, this design was built. And for me, I thought that these cars were a really great symbol and metaphor about what it meant to be from the border, what it meant to be from El Paso. These were a sophisticated way of crossing, and they're a way of showing a different vision and a different view of the border. And so when I had the opportunity to do my thesis in graduate school, I decided to do something a little bit different. I wanted to do a project that could imagine a better future between the two cities and could try to talk about what it meant to be from the border, to challenge representation. In 2010, when I started my thesis, the cartel violence in Juarez was at an all-time high. In 2011, more people were killed in Ciudad Juarez than were killed in all of Afghanistan during that same time. And I wanted to do a project that could imagine something different. So I created an ad campaign for a fictional streetcar to run between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez again. The El Paso Transnational Trolley was a year-long ad campaign. It featured a logo that was designed with our mountains and our star on the mountain, with a mascot, Alex the trolley conductor, the border's newest hero. We had a campaign launch in Sunland Park Mall where people could get their picture taken with the border's newest hero, with Alex. And the whole idea was to try to imagine something, to make something as fake as believable as possible. We put up we-paste posters daring people to imagine something different at a time of such violence. And I think that that's really important to do, because if you can't imagine a better future, you can't have one. And so we put up posters of the old streetcars, put up these posters of that, and then I came home. I decided to come home because there's a lot of momentum going on with I Felt This project, and I was open towards it. And I think that's one of these big idea lessons to learn, is to be open to a project evolving and to try to bring in partners. I was invited to come down to El Paso in the summer of 2011 to be involved in a public art project as part of a public art festival. And the day I landed, I started taking portraits in black and white. I took portraits in El Paso, I took portraits in Ciudad Juarez and Las Cruces, New Mexico. And over 2 months and a little over 2,154 portraits, I came up with the faces of the frontera. This is a mosaic of, anybody want to guess it? One of the trolleys. And so the whole thing with this is that you can't tell who's from Mexico, who's from New Mexico, who's from Texas, right? And that's precisely the point. Because where we're from, everything crosses. Family crosses, economy crosses, culture crosses, food crosses. You know, the idea that you can separate the two cities or the region is impossible. And so it was put up as part of this Chocolate Block Festival. It was also placed throughout downtown. And as I started to come back to El Paso, I started becoming more civically engaged. I was asked to be part of a San Jacinto redesign committee, our central plaza in downtown. It's beautiful, you should come and check it out. There's some really great ping pong tables. We have an alligator sculpture by Luis Jimenez in our center. And one of the ideas that we had as part of this group was having a streetcar cafe, kind of like a Shake Shack. It would have been placed right there. The city at the end of the day said they couldn't have a streetcar line. These old streetcars are out dying in the desert, couldn't be used, and we were trying to sell them. And at that point, I felt kind of upset about that. I said, we shouldn't be selling our history, we should be celebrating it. And the project evolved from an art project into a grassroots project. There was a bond initiative in 2012 looking for different projects that the city did. improvements in our libraries, trailheads, Olympic-sized swimming pools, that sort of thing. And one of the ideas is that you could have comment cards where people could write in their own ideas. And so knowing that the city at one point had done numerous studies for an intra-city streetcar line, right, from our university downtown, we decided to try to hijack the process. Alice, the trolley conductor, was now going out and collecting signatures, asking people to assort a vintage streetcar line throughout our university to our downtown area. We went everywhere doing this. This is at our first Friday's Party La Parada. In a little under 2 months, we had collected over 1,800 signatures. More signatures than any other project in that bond project, more than a soccer stadium, more than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And that interest, the city said, we're going to put it on the bonds, except that they didn't. They said a transit project cannot be considered quality of life. However, this support the city was able to use to lobby the Texas Department of Transportation for what became a $97 million grant to fund a vintage streetcar line between our university and our downtown area using the very old cars. And then we waited. New mayor came into town, we waited to see what would happen, and finally the money was released, but I couldn't wait any longer and I decided to run for city council. I ran on a campaign of a fresh perspective, and after a long campaign with 6 other candidates and runoff, we did it, we won. I won. Well, El Paso won, the future won. This is a picture of my first couple months when we opened up our bike share program. I think you guys have the same bikes here. And as I was doing those things that you're supposed to do when you're in public office, like going to Thanksgiving Day parades and checking up on potholes, it's a very different medium to be in politics than it is to be in photography, I'll tell you that much. Something else was happening too. The streetcars were off again. They're being lifted up off of the desert to be taken to Brookville, Pennsylvania, to be remanufactured with Wi-Fi, HVAC, and being ADA compliant. Currently, that's where they are now. These should be arriving at the beginning of 2018 into El Paso. And while I was in office, and I'm still in office, tracks started coming into town, started being laid again. And while that was going on, we were also looking at other ways to imagine a better future as well. Politics is a different medium than art, but good ideas are good ideas. And so one of the things we worked on was in February of this year, I introduced an item in my city council to look at funding a feasibility study for a pedestrian-oriented multimodal transportation system between El Paso, Texas and Ciudad Juarez. To look at a feasibility study about what would it cost to look at reintroducing a streetcar line or a monorail or a gondola as some sort of way to get people over the border in a safe and efficient way for a 21st century innovation economy. Because as y'all all know here in Austin, human capital is one of the most important resources you can have as a region and as a city. Except that our human capital exists on two sides, exists between two countries. And so this was something that was introduced. We basically looked at what would it look like to do a monorail in the 21st century. I worked with an architect who graduated from El Paso, who graduated from UT's architectural program. And currently this feasibility study is on the list of the 2045 list from the Metropolitan Planning Organization of El Paso, of which I was recently appointed. So I'm very excited to see where this project could go. I think that I never would have thought that this project could evolve into a real project, but I think that when we talk about entrepreneurship and we talk about art, we have to be open towards projects evolving and also working with partners and collaborators that we may not have ever imagined. It's very important to have that there. And so again, thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Sharon Keshishian. I'm an Austin-based artist. I work primarily in neon glass and metal. I've experimented with lots of mediums though throughout the years. After about 30 years ago, I started a company called Ion Art. It was a small little neon shop at the time. Today, it's a world-class design build company. We design, fabricate, and install sculpture, signage, architectural decor in Austin and all over the country. We specialize in unique and complicated projects. So I'm skipping all my pictures. Okay, that's a couple of the things that we've done. Get caught up here. Okay. As a team of creatives, we take the imaginary and we make it real. Our clients come with concepts for a project and we translate their ideas and their goals into a finished product. We've been lucky, we've been involved in creating and restoring some of the most iconic commercial signage and art in Austin. State Theater, one of them. Art's always been my passion ever since I can remember. I graduated from Stephen F. Austin in 1982 with a degree in forestry, game management, and biology wildlife, and a minor in sculpture, thinking I was going to get a real career. When I graduated in the early 80s, the economy was really tough, jobs were hard, so I started thinking about going back to being an artist again. I knew Austin was a creative town, and I decided to move here. My first job was working with an artist named Damien Freer, building stained glass windows. During this time, I was exposed to the business of art and marketing. I began thinking about my own projects and how I could make a living doing them. I took a class on neon bending and realized right away I had a natural affinity. In fact, I sold my first neon job before I was even out of class. And that was 30 years ago, and it was Manuel's on Congress, and it's still there. I was doing small jobs around Austin, restaurants, hair salons, logos, anything that people would pay me to do. Back in those days, neon coyotes and cactuses were really big in the early 80s. So how did I progress from being a small neon business to a giant high-end custom fabrication company? Well, one day in 1987, my future husband, Greg Keshishian, walked into my shop. Greg and I soon discovered that we had a shared passion for art and for building things with our hands, and that together we could make a really powerful team. Greg brought fabrication and engineering skills and lots of energy. With Greg on board, we proceeded to do more and more complicated projects, allowing us to bring in more creative employees with strengths and abilities meshed with ours. It was our old shop on Rio Grande. Due to the nature of our business, we were dependent on the economy. Every time it went up and down, we went up and down. We struggled for years to stay afloat. We survived by keeping our overhead really low, and we lived in our shop. We bartered with restaurants and with businesses and had tabs all over town. We've been lucky over the years to have had some key clients at some critical times that have really helped us grow, primarily Whole Foods. We did the very first neon sign for Whole Foods on their Lamar location. This involved a long-term relationship, which we still have today. Because Whole Foods and its founders were really young and hip at the time and cool, they gave us a lot of creative license. And so we partnered with them during their rapid expansion to create signage and interiors for their stores all over the country. Our relationship with Whole Foods gave us the credibility to work with other bigger companies. Throughout the 90s, other bigger jobs with big clients came, such as Shady Grove, Romeo's, Mezzaluna, Bebop, and the Alligator Grill. We were feeling confident that we were here to stay. We found a piece of land in South Austin. This was Radham Lane. And we launched an ambitious project to build a studio space for ourselves and for other creative businesses. Having our own custom space not only allowed for bigger and better projects, it gave a sense of legitimacy to us. Clients could come in and they could see our large-scale projects coming to life. It was a huge advantage for us in landing more sophisticated clients. Early in the 2000s, we had 6 employees. The real estate developers were looking for creative companies that experience and ability could execute large-scale, complicated projects and sculptures, which was really exciting for us. We found ourselves bidding against nationwide design and build firms with huge projects. We realized we needed some key employees to enhance our skills. This was when we made a huge leap forward from hand cutting and hand drawing to using computer-aided design programs that interfaced with all the new equipment that was being invented, like the CNC router, the plasma cutter here, and other large format printers. We hired a graphic designer because we needed someone who knew how to do the computer programs, Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. And then in 2008, the recession started. All the projects dried up, everything was put on hold. What projects there were had low budgets, and they cut all the fluff, which was usually the art pieces. We managed to stay afloat because we had a couple of big ongoing projects that were in the pipeline, like the Amley piece and the W Hotel. We learned a really tough lesson, though. We did not react quickly enough to the change of the economy. This was partly due to us not wanting to lay off any employees, but we had to. From that experience, we really had to think hard about when we added a new team member. We became more in tune with the rate of growth of our company. The last 5 years in Austin have brought phenomenal growth and opportunity to Ion Art. We have 47 super creative employees, and that's where we want to stay. We don't want to get any bigger. This is because we want to remain a small boutique hotel that focuses on, or not hotel, business that focuses on high quality and unique custom projects. This is not my forte talking. I can't tell. Or doing pictures at the same time. Okay. Every person who works at Ion Art brings a unique set of skills that contribute to all the different parts of the project. Our employees range from designers to fabricators to painters to installers. We value ingenuity, hard work, and a leadership above all. The skills that our team members have brought to Ion Art have increased our capabilities considerably. We depend on our employees for the philosophy to represent our philosophy of integrity and excellent craftsmanship. This is how we now have the reputation we have today. We do not have a sales team. Our only means of advertising is word of mouth. With our expanded team, we took off. One iconic project we did was a neon Playboy bunny sculpture. The bunny was 40 foot tall and installed in Marfa, Texas, and it sparked conversations of art versus advertising. It now resides in front of the Dallas Contemporary Museum of Art. A really cool fact about this project is we made the cover of Playboy with it. The only neon ever on the cover of Playboy. Some other recent projects we've done are the Seahome Power Plant, Sky Vodka, who we're doing a lot of really cool art projects with right now, the Hotel Van Zandt, the Capitol Factory, and Maudie's. Oh, the Maudie's picture didn't turn out right. Okay. Another important client that's helped us grow is Kendra Scott, a local jewelry designer. We've designed, built, and installed interior decor and storefront systems for over 60 stores now, and we have a lot more in the pipeline. 2017 is shaping up to be our biggest year yet, with so much growth in Austin and lots of opportunity for big, cool art projects. This is really exciting for us. One project that we just recently completed was the ATX sculpture for Whole Foods, which is at 5th and Lamar. Through the years, I've kept up with all my own sculptures, showing in galleries and art shows, most recently in Pop Austin. We've also participated in the Cow Parade, creating the Disc Cow. Having Ion Art really honed my skills and gave me the resources to enhance my personal artwork, and has introduced me to many creative and artistic people. It also gives me great studio space. Being an artist will always be my first love and will always affect the way that I operate my business. I'm honored to have been influencing Austin cityscape for decades. It's an exciting time to be in Austin. Hopefully Ion Art will continue to create and contribute large-scale art pieces to the cityscape. If there's any advice I can give you, which I don't really know if I can, is to be passionate about what you love and to do what you love and just work really hard at it. I mean, it'll be up and down and come and go, but you just have to stick it out and suffer. There's a lot of suffering. But but it's worth it, for sure. Thanks.
Calder had asked me to moderate the panel, but then she also invited me to spend a few minutes just introducing a few of the big ideas that I've worked on as a curator, which is another kind of creative professional. And as I was watching everybody's presentations, I thought, yeah, I'll just skip that part and we'll go to questions. And then I thought, no, actually what's happened is a lot of what I was going to pull out of my stories will reinforce what they've been saying. So if you'll bear with me, and I didn't bring pictures for this part, I'm just going to tell you about a few things that I've worked on. So curators of contemporary art, which I am a specimen of still, are by nature entrepreneurial. We're jugglers, skilled jugglers. We're producers with a really robust sense of curiosity and a passion to translate that to other people. For most every project, we start with an idea or a notion, and then we try to break it down and tell its stories using works of art. So there's the idea of translation. I love to take on huge amounts of field research. So therefore, for me, big ideas means big work, which is certainly what I heard here on the panel. On any given project that I'll talk about, I'm out meeting dozens, if not hundreds of people, seeing myriad manifestations of creative activity before culling through those experiences, culling them down to an exquisite idea, that's what I think, that I hope can provoke and delight others. So 3 projects I've done over the course of my career that reinforce some of the ideas here and lead us to this larger discussion of big ideas and how do you do it and what does it mean. From 93 to 96, I was the visual arts producer for the Olympic Games in Atlanta, the 1996 Olympic Games. There's always a cultural staff that's built, and I produced all the visual arts activity for that. I had a $7 million budget to spend over 3 years, super different from my normal job working for nonprofits, during which I was able to commission new works, create exhibitions, and build visual arts components of a number of kind of regional and international festivals. One of the major things that we wanted to do in that Olympic Games was create a new imagination of the American South. Not the old cliches, but a new idea of this technology-savvy, young, diverse, even in many cases progressive community that was not only contributing to, but in many ways leading the nation. And one of the projects that I did there was an exhibition called Out of Bounds, new work by 8 Southeast artists. So I'm a newcomer to the Southeast at that point. I moved there from New Orleans. And I worked with the curator of what was the Kunsthalle, or the non-collecting contemporary exhibition space there called Nexus Contemporary Art Center. She and I, Julia Fenton and I, solicited 1,500 nominations from artists and arts professionals throughout a 12-state area that we called the Southeast, basically from Virginia over to Louisiana and everything in between, not Texas though. 1,500 nominations, from which 800 artists submitted slides. That's 800 people times 12 slides each, which we looked at, and then we called that list down, did 150 studio visits across 12 states over about 9 months for a show that featured 8 artists. Big work from big ideas. What did it take to make the realization of that project a success? It took excellent logistical management on the ground from a team of interns and artists with whom we shared all of our results. That means what we believed in was being as transparent as possible, not owning an idea, but sharing that idea so that others could add to it and we could actually get the best ideas from all the members of the team. I know that was present in the conversations or the presentations we've just heard. Collaboration was key, not only between myself and the other curator, but with the arts professionals who offered us information and, really important, hospitality as we traveled around the country trying to do this research. And with the artists themselves, collaborating with them to make works for the exhibition. One of the small byproducts that came out of that project was the artists' excitement about having their work be seen. For many, it was the very first studio visit they'd ever had with a professional curator. For others, especially in Miami, where a lot of New York goes to vacation in the winter, they'd seen people from the art world before, but in almost all cases it was really rare, so that was just an unexpected byproduct, super exciting. A huge byproduct was the awareness that came from being able to showcase the relative diversity of expression and population of artists that were part of that series. So that's one way, and that underscores a bunch of things here. I don't want to take too much time. I've got a couple of other examples where I did projects that sent me out, traveling, pulling together communities of people, leaving out the details. We did a show of collections owned by UT Austin alums a few years ago at the Blanton Museum when I was there. And one of the outcomes of that was that unexpectedly, there suddenly was a community of people who had a shared experience and felt connected and identified because they all graduated from UT and they all have these interests in common. My God, they had amazing works of art. Again, it brought people together. We had no idea it could do that. Right now, I'm getting ready to write a book for UT Press about the Texas art scene of the past 30 years. And I'll simply say that one of the most important parts of the research for that is gleaning, as it has been on other projects, and I think I'm going to ask questions about this of our panelists, gleaning other perspectives, making sure that you as the leader, you as the visionary, are not the only perspective that is describing the contours of your project, but that you're actively soliciting perspectives from other people. What do you know about this? That's what I'm asking dozens and dozens and dozens of colleagues and artists around the state. What do you think was important in the past 30 years? Who do you think the change makers were? And what I know that will give me is a much, much broader field of consideration than I ever could have gotten to on my own. It helps identify the compelling stories that other people are going to want to know about, and it allows that process to come to fruition because you trust your instincts on how process can develop. So turning to this panel, I wanted to ask a few questions that kind of underscore these ideas about collaboration, about sharing a vision, about realizing a vision in collaboration with other people and with audiences or with clients. And one of the questions I would ask is, in the art world, we think of audiences. In the business world, we tend to think of clients. So both those entities are consumers, but how do you adjust your thinking, if at all, to reaching that different outcome group, if you want to call it that? I see you as artists working adjacent to or within different business models, but I'm also seeing a great proportion of your own creative visions allowed to be manifest in the process of your successful business, government, research processes. So who would like to take a stab at that?
So, is this on?
Yeah, you just have to put it to
so
you.
the question is kind of the difference between.
Just
Hello?
pull it towards you. Yeah.
So the question is about client work versus.
Audience, I mean, is there a difference, given that you're artists working within business, governmental, research models? Do you feel like there's a difference between the way you would think of your audience if you're just a maker of an object and how you think of your clients? And how do you translate that? How do you make that adjustment?
I guess for me, with my experiences, public art is more dangerous. With that being said, there's public art like doing a mural, doing a wheat paste. That's different than, say, like a public art commission, where essentially it is client work in a lot of ways. If you're doing a public art piece for the city, for example, I think that because before graduate school and the trolley went the way that it did, I was represented by a photo agency in New York, and I was doing a lot of editorial and advertising work. And so when you're working with the client, like there's certain parameters and expectations that they have. And within that framework, you can sort of play within, but at the end of the day, it is a commission. The thing about public art, and I think maybe Joseph could talk about it like that, when we put up those posters for the streetcar, it was kind of planning without permission. And for some people, I'd say probably folks that were 35 and under, these kind of quirky black and white wheat paste done on the side of buildings that were not really that professional, people understood that language to be street art and to sort of be in a place of questioning things. There was people that were that were older that looked at those posters and took them at face value, and there was a pretty heated online conversation about that at one point, where some people were offended or questioned by these, like, how can you have these posters talking about the border when there's so much violence, cartel violence in Ciudad Juarez, something like that.
Joseph, do you actually embed yourself in an organization, or do you go to the organization or the architecture, whoever occupies that architecture, with an idea that's already determined? Does it come out of an interaction, or do you just deliver?
It can be both, I think for me personally, there's a primal reason for painting on walls. Some like my client-based work has been, I worked as a house painter, since I was in college, painting people's houses. So, but once I started doing murals, to me it just felt very natural. I mean, when you look at cave paintings, you wonder, why did these people, start painting on the walls there, And that's kind of, I have that feeling that there's something about making images in the world that we inhabit, in the architecture that we live in. So much of the architecture in our world is just depressing looking. So I think, why is that? It just bums me out sometimes walking around. I'll see a building and it'll just make me feel sad. But
So you want to paint it?
so I have this feeling like I want to just bring some joy and love to those walls that are embarrassed.
I like it that in this case, it's your audience is the wall itself, in a way. You're helping the wall.
Yeah, that's how I think of it.
Sharon, what about you? I mean, you've obviously built a business from the ground up, you and your husband. Is the business your work of art, or are you engaged in a way with clients that you feel is different because you are an art maker and you have a different role? It's not the, can I get your business role? It's the, I'm amazing, I have great ideas, don't you want a piece of this pitch,
Well, I don't know if it's that, but let's see. As far as clients with selling my artwork or selling a commercial commission piece, of course, if it's a commission piece, I follow some parameters that the client might have. Like they might say, oh, we want it to be hanging or this big or this colors or to represent some particular thing. Whereas with my personal art, I can make whatever I want. One thing about having the business as a creative and being personally creative is when I'm doing my personal art, I don't feel like I have to do it for anyone else. Like I don't have to make it to sell it. I can just make it for fun because that's what I like to do. Whereas the commercial stuff, as far as interacting with the clients, I feel like that I come and they can tell that I'm excited. If it's a project I'm excited to work on, people can tell, and you can talk about it and show, and it's really fun. I think selling any art, you always have your clients in mind. Whether it's a commercial or from an art gallery, you're still trying to sell it, so it's So it's like, when is that fine line of when it's not commercial anymore? Because to me, once you sell it, then it's a commercial piece.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about this business of hard work that you all mentioned in different ways. So I was doing a studio visit with an artist here in town today. She's been working as hard as anyone I ever have met anywhere for the past 20 plus years, and her career has just taken off. She's on fire right now. And she told me, even so, she listens at night to Malcolm Gladwell on audio tapes, talking about the fact that, you know, his idea, one of his core ideas in The Outliers, was that it takes 10,000 hours of concerted work on something to build up the expertise and the confidence to be successful at it. What do y'all think about this idea of hard work and success, and how does it play out in your careers so far? What's hard work for you, and what's success for you?
I think it's definitely hard work. I mean, we put in hours and hours and hours learning how to do our business and making mistakes and starting over. But it's definitely a lot of work.
You said that in your talk.
I said that in my talk.
What was I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, like, what's hard work for you? Do you think what you do is hard work? And if so, or related to that, is hard work related to success for you? Do the two go hand in hand?
That's a very hard question to answer, but I do feel like when I start working, if I'm working on a project, to me it definitely doesn't seem like hard work. That's just something I really enjoy. But I haven't listened to audiobooks or anything like that. I usually listen to music. That's one of my main sources of inspiration. Friends of mine have told me, you gotta check out this podcast, and I just can't do it. But music is, for me, is like, when I'm working, I always listen to music.
I think when you talk about hard work, you know, I think there's a myth, right, about the artist in society, that there's a muse, and artists can only work when they're inspired by the divine spirit, or whatever. Being a working artist, regardless of what medium, means to create a space for yourself to do the work, to make the work that you want to make. Mm-hmm. And part of that is understanding that the creative process is partially about creativity, but there's also a lot of boring back-end stuff too that is part of that. Sure. So having a full-time job is no excuse not to be a working artist. It just depends, when are you going to give yourself the time to work on your art? Is it going to be every Sunday for 3 hours? Is it going to be every evening? Are you going to wake up at 5 a.m. like I think William Carlos Williams used to do? You know, write for a couple hours and then go and be a doctor? You know, where are you going to be able to go and do that? Because part of working is not just necessarily the act of creation. There's a research component, right? There's a component relating towards housekeeping, whether that's maintaining a studio, whether that's invoicing clients, whether that's researching new clients, right? Researching other buses to find out and hijack and take across the country. You know, that's part of it. The other component, I think, when you talk about working hard, I think there's also a certain component that contradicted almost what I said, but it's being able to hustle, being able to create the opportunities for yourself. I think that my time spent in New York was one where I learned that lesson more than any other, and that lesson was what gave me the confidence, or gave me the ability to go and say, I'm going to go to El Paso. I feel something there. Let me see how far this thing could go. And I think that that's part of the artistic process as well, is to go beyond just making the work into creating opportunity for yourself, right? And not letting anybody sort of stop you from doing that. Mm-hmm. And that's part of, I think, the working process as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that all three of you have in common is that you don't, and I'm sure that's why Calder invited you here, is that you don't just make work in a studio. You are in some way or form publicly performing your role as an artist/citizen of the community. I want to come back to you, Peter, because there's a very particular interpretation of artist/citizen that I think you've taken on. But I'm interested as well for Joseph and for Sharon, because Joseph, you're working in a public realm when you're working. You're out there showing people how you do what you do, whether you're actively doing that or not. And then Sharon, you own a business. You're a small businesswoman. And that's showing people that artists, pay the bills and have kids that go to public school and, do all the things that regular citizens do. So I guess my question for the two of you would be, do you think about that ever? Are you aware of this as a kind of performance in quotation marks, or is it just such a natural part of your being that it's a, extraneous idea? Or what's your response to that idea of artist as citizen?
So I enjoy being outside and, working. Sometimes, if you're working outside on painting on a wall, people are always going to come up and talk to you. So, and it's going to be like some kids or like an old lady, or just people that maybe. I definitely enjoy just working in areas that are maybe. Well, I definitely know artists that, just work in a studio and they have art shows and they work within that art world, and
That's much more private.
that's a really nice thing to do because, the art world is a nice world, but I enjoy sometimes going outside of that, and for me it's more exciting to do something where maybe an artist you wouldn't necessarily find an artist working. Like my project at CERN, it was really interesting to meet people that are mainly scientists and physicists, but I think of my audience as just like the human being, all of us. We all share this, we all share something that is like, looking around the world and basically being curious about the world around us.
Thanks. Sharon?
Could you say the question again?
Well, just like there are artists that just kind of do things in private, and that's where their
okay.
creative process takes place. But you guys, each in your own different ways, have very public positions and processes as artists. And so what's your feeling about that? What's been your experience of that?
I like working with the public and doing big projects. I enjoy the camaraderie of our team and our group and working together. It causes you to push the boundaries. At Ion Art, with all the people that we have there, when we have a project that comes in, we can sit around and brainstorm and discuss it and build it, and we put it up out in the public for everyone to see, and most people like them. Sometimes people don't, like the Playboy, which wasn't very liked. But let's see, I don't really know how to explain it, but I feel like that definitely being out in the public and exposing yourself and putting yourself out for people to talk back or to make comments is good for you. I think if you're just in the art world, you can kind of just get caught up in your own little thing and not be aware of the whole big picture that's going on around you.
Thanks. Good.
Okay.
Peter, what about you? You've taken this step. You've run for city council. Your previous art experience, I feel like, must have been part of this era that we've had for the past decade or more of thinking of artists in a more socially responsible stance. And how does that fit for you philosophically, and what's your experience of it been?
Well, I think that one of the one of the impetuses of me starting that project and focusing on it, you know, in graduate school was kind of I guess a frustration with kind of the work that I saw being produced by some of my colleagues in SVA. I felt that there was a lot of work that was being made, that people were making it because it's what they thought should be in Chelsea, right? It's what they thought should be made to be put into a gallery. And there was no clear path towards it, no clear explanation by why this gets chosen and that doesn't. And at the end of the day, and this comes from a background, I guess, working as a professional creative, is that at the end of the day, as it still is a commodity if it's on a gallery wall. I mean, we talk about client work, we talk about work for ourselves. I mean, having a commission, it felt that the work being made there wasn't necessarily genuine. So I really wanted to do work that could sort of exist in the real world and to engage in it. And being that I am from El Paso, and even when I was in New York, I was, you know, in El Paso and in New York, and obviously I came back home eventually. But it was important for me to do work that could sort of raise questions in the real world. And there was a quote that I had on a blog that I did to sort of journaled the beginning of the project, and that's moved there. And that's a quote by Guillermo Gomez Pena. I'll read it to you. And it says, "An artist imagines a better world and tries to render it in surprising ways. And this becomes a new way for his/her audiences to experience the possibilities of freedom that they can't find in reality." Yeah. And that was something important to me. With the context of when the project started, with the violence that was occurring in Ciudad Juarez, it was paralyzing both cities. You had a tremendous amount of folks that were coming to El Paso to escape the violence. You had people that refused to come, that would cross back and forth every day, that were not coming from the north into the south. And so I really thought it was important to do whatever I could to write a love letter to the city that raised me, to talk about what it meant to be from there. As it relates towards, I guess, being in council now and the role of an artist, artist in society is kind of what you're asking, is I mean, I guess I'm still figuring that out. I think what art does and what an artist does is they're able to look at things not as they are, but what they can be. And having somebody like that within a medium of policy is an important one. And I hope it's one that others are going to as well. You know, I'm certainly not the first one to do it, but it's interesting to sort of come with issues of policy from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, can I just comment on that? I think that's really interesting that Peter, has gone into politics and, as an artist, and then also there's been some Texas politicians who have retired and gone into art. So maybe there's something happening here where more artists can run for office, and some of the politicians can try, a life in the arts. But I think what he's saying is about the imagination is really interesting, because that's what we all have. We all, I kind of hate that term creative, as if, that's like a sector of society that's creative. But, obviously everybody, human beings are creative. So it's like, I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think artists totally have a different opportunity. We believe such a dying need and such a desire to create and to express, and that is one that we have that responsibility, gift, curse, whatever you want to call it. And so the question is how does that go? How does that go and extend into other facets of society as well?
Right, exactly. I mean, I really appreciate all three perspectives that you've introduced here today. I'll ask a final question, then we'll open it up to the audience. And that is, have you had people that ask you advice about how they can do what you do? Have you had artists come and say, how do I start a business? Or how can I get involved working with, science organizations and creating murals and, doing the kinds of, city-changing projects like you've done. Have you had other artists interested in that? Or flip it, I guess, in the Josef way and say, have any business people come up and said, how do I get to do more of what you do?
I've had both artists and business people come up and
Okay.
ask me that too.
Okay.
Because a lot of people look on the outside looking in, think it's really
just so
fun
cool.
all the time and you're just
Yeah.
playing and they don't
Right.
realize, like you said, there's so much other infrastructure required
Right.
with
Right.
doing projects besides just the fun part of making them. In fact, that's kind of one of the sad parts of having the business or being the owner of the business is I don't really get to play as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I have to run the business.
Yeah.
And some of the people that work for me, they get to have more fun, I think, during the day than I do, blowing glass or doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
But when artists, I've had other people ask me how I did this or stuck it out or started. And it's like you said, it's just some drive you have in you or something where you just kind of have to do it. It's hard to explain. And so once you're doing it, you're just so busy doing it, you don't realize.
Yeah.
And then it happens. But it's, I don't know, it's hard to explain sometimes.
Well, what you've just said really well is what is true for all three of you, which is that what you've done or what you've become or how you're doing it maybe has been such an organic process. It's not, this is my goal and this is how I'm going to do it, but in fact you have kind of just grown into it by doing what you do.
That's true.
And your lens has broadened by necessity because of your curiosity and because of what you want to do with what you do. So that's all to your credit. Anybody else got a thought about mentorship or advice from people asking advice?
Well, I think usually if you have an idea of something you'd like to do, but you're really scared to do it, I think that's the one you should do. Because that's usually the good one.
That's great advice. That's great advice.
I don't think I've had anybody go and say, like, I want to go and do a project like that, like, how do you do it? I think that I've had a couple teachers along the way, I wouldn't call them mentors, but photography teachers, and they've given really good advice. One was, make the work you want to make. If you want to shoot for the New York Times Magazine, study those portraits, study environmental portraiture, and create a body of work that you can show to an editor, that you can show to an editor, a collector, somebody, to a crit group that can show that you can get feedback from.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Another advice is if you don't like where you are, shoot your way out. And it comes, I mean, in the photographic context, right? By making work, you can improve where you are, you can change where you want to be. And I think that's an important part. One of the things that I think is interesting, I was at, you kind of asked, like, how is, I guess, not from the artist side, but how is the other side there? And there was a workshop I was at last week. It was about looking at how art and culture can inform transportation. It was sponsored by Art Place for America and Transportation for America, and it featured artists and transportation professionals, urban planners. And one of the things I was looking at was that intersection between art and transportation and how those things can really get there. So in the case of that is you have transportation professionals looking at creative placemaking, looking at tactical urbanism, looking at art projects that sort of hypothesize alternate futures, like a transnational trolley. There's another gentleman who did a mock website for an Eastern Michigan rail line. But that's what an artist can do, right? We look at things, we don't look at the past, we don't look at the present, we imagine what can be. Whether that is a bus and an empty wall, whether that's, neon and a front that needs to be activated, or an interior. we look and imagine what can be. Even if a painter starts off with a blank canvas and draws a line down the middle, and you got a horizon, and off you go. So that's something that we can do. What's interesting is being in a situation like this transportation workshop, because they're looking at artists as ways to look at alternatives or as ways to liaison
To
and
find
engage.
a fresh way of thinking.
Exactly.
Well, props to the city of Austin for understanding that and putting artists in so
Absolutely.
many different departments. That's pretty great, yeah.
Yep.
Calder, do you want to field some questions?
I'll come to you.
To Joseph, how do you went to overseas to do that mural? How did that come about? Maybe I missed that. How did you get that project going?
So one of the tools that I think has been really successful for me is just emailing. You can go really far just by emailing somebody. So it was like it was my dream. I thought, well, if I could do anything, what would I want to do? It was one of those kind of dream projects. And, I just emailed CERN basically the Union of Nuclear Researchers, and they had like a communications office that I emailed. I found their email on the internet, and then it started there. So I started next. It was a phone call, and we just went from there. They weren't sure why I was contacting them or what what my vision was, but I told them, I have this vision, I have this dream that I'd love to paint this mural there at CERN. And she said, well, we have a lot of gray walls, so let me see what I can do. So that's how it started.
These people are undaunted, if you haven't noticed. Yeah.
How was that made? Was you get a grant, or how were you able to go?
Well, that's a more complicated question. Well, I can tell you that in the beginning, there was, they basically, I worked for about a year to get permission to do the project. After a lot of different meetings and correspondence, they said, well, we finally got permission from all the 72 nations involved, but sadly we don't have any money to do this project, so I guess we'll leave it at that. And I basically said, I would find the money somehow to do it, and I just I think I put airplane ticket on a credit card and just showed up at their office. Started trying to get working on this wall, and eventually, about halfway through the project, they did find some funding. I honestly don't know where it came from, but they ended up paying for it in the end.
I'm thinking vegetable oil was involved in some way. Was that Calder?
Yes, I thought of this one for Sharon. I'm interested in how you personally feel the challenge of making a product within the parameters of your client and something that will appeal to them. How does that affect your creativity? And how do you create yourself creatively healthy while also having to do all the work of running a business?
Well, let's see, with the client, how do I do what with the client? How do I interact on their projects?
How does the challenge of appealing to their parameters and their desires affect your creativity? Does it stimulate it for you? Is it something that holds you
I
back?
think it stimulates a lot of times. It's always a challenge when somebody comes to you. Like recently, we just got commissioned to do a large piece that we're getting ready to do. And they did. They said, we want it to hang in this big open paseo. Can y'all make something hanging here? And, you know, we want it jeweled, or we want this on it. And to me, I look at that as a challenge, and it's exciting. And you want to make it look good and make it the best it can be. And it's fun working with different people and different customers and different ideas and clients of what they like and what they think. And so I look at it as it's a challenge, but I enjoy it.
Hi, over here. This goes for anybody on the panel. How do you personally handle negativity, whether it's external politics with pushback, or internal, you're working on a project and it's starting to creep in, you're not satisfied with the project? I know it exists. Is there a process that you have created, or do you push through it? What's your own personal way of how you handle negativity?
Well, let me tell you something. You're never going to go and please 100% of the people at any time. And that applies to art, and it certainly applies towards politics. Your drive, or at least my drive, I can't speak for the others here, but the drive to create is an internal one, right? It's one that's self-satisfactory. So it's important for myself to remind me, or to remind each other, that you're doing this for yourself as well, and that at the end of the day, the process is an important one. No matter whether or not a curator may like it, or a constituent may like it, or your brother may like it, right? The process of making it is one that's valuable in and of itself for you. And just understanding that, you know, you gotta be like a duck to water and just let it roll off your back. You know, that was I had one of my peers in city council, the first week they gave me a little rubber duck, and they said, you gotta be like a duck. So.
Anybody else want to tackle that?
No,
one?
I agree that you cannot let it affect you. I remember being in sculpture class, we would have to put our sculptures out in front of the room, and then everyone would sit around and talk about them. And one woman had her piece out there, and it wasn't getting good reviews, and she got really upset and started crying and left. And you just can't do that. You have to let it just roll off. But you have to realize too, them not liking it is also a response. You can't expect everyone to like everything that you do. And like Peter was saying, you want to do it for yourself. You're not really doing it for somebody else.
I would say just ignore the negativity. You know, if you think about it, you'll never get anything done if you just let that get to you. So just find something that you enjoy. Sometimes just don't even put it out of your mind.
Yeah, there will always be haters, so.
I would add to what they just said, and to just point out that tension can be really productive. You know, it's a fact that there are productivities to tension, and to find a way to use that tension in the creative process. It's sort of like the idea that Josef said before about, you know, find the thing you're most afraid of, and that's the thing that you set your goal on. You know, when things are negative, and, you know, as a curator, I've been through that a million times too, you just have to find a way. I think also one way to do it is to go back to who you are every time. You kind of literally find your core, both in terms of your physical strength, but also your psychic knowledge of who you are. What do you care about? What do you stand for? You know, how do you define yourself? How can you use this to define yourself? Try to find something about who you are and put that into the negative situation, and it's actually worked for me.
Thank you for sharing your process and ideas. I had a question that could be for any of you, but perhaps Peter might be able to answer. Have you ever involved the community in the creation of the final product of your artwork, where other people are involved, like community-based? I mean, your mural you took photographs of people and made, so in that sense they were involved, but you were the one who took the photographs. but has the community ever been involved in any of the projects?
There's been a couple projects. There was another project that I did when I first came back to El Paso. There was an old warehouse, it was an El Paso Saddle Blankets building that was going to be demolished for our art space in El Paso. And in the process of that, I had put up some murals there, and so I knew the property owners and basically coordinated the ability to have a long weekend where about a dozen artists from El Paso and Juarez came in and each got a spot and put their own thing. And that was, again, at this time where things were slowly starting to improve in Juarez, and we sort of wanted to show a positive vision of collaboration of the reality there on the border. So that was community driven in that sense. I think that the trolley project came from a place, and you're right, I did take all those pictures myself, but there was also a space too where in that dialogue and taking those pictures, there was an opportunity to communicate to people about the larger project and about this history that we had with the streetcar, that without that space that portrait created would never have it existed. So in that way it was collaborative. And then there's a whole kosher taco truck that I did as well, but that's a whole nother thing. Yes.
Yeah, so last year, my wife and I were working on a really big mural in San Francisco, and our scaffold collapsed, and my wife was really seriously injured. And up to that point, most of my business had been with a particular hotel chain that made boutique hotels and nightclubs and that kind of thing. And following that event, nobody wanted anything to do with us because they were afraid of just legal ramifications of any communication whatsoever with us. And so all of a sudden I was regretting having all my eggs in one basket with one client and one curator. And I was wondering if you guys have had anything in your careers thus far where things kind of imploded and you had to rebuild in the middle with I guess maybe what you had before, or finding a new clientele or something to that effect.
Well, my husband and I, we had our business downtown Austin. We were on Rio Grande. We had a shop. Well, in 1994, it caught on fire. There was actually a frame shop next door, and the frame shop caught on fire, and it totally burned us up. And it was in the middle of the night. We barely got out alive, and we had to, we didn't get out with anything. We lost everything. That was our business and our home that night. And so we had to totally start over. And we had some clients that came and stuck with us. We had one client in particular that they canceled their deposit. They just paid a check and they bailed on us, and they just figured we would never be able to finish the project. But then it also brought out the best in a lot of people in Austin, because we had one of our competitors, Classical Glass, come and offer us studio space at his studio. And we were able to go there and work there and finish projects and work on things that we have. And just the outpouring of people that came and supported us, it really helped get it going again. But yeah, there's always those down times when you think you're never going to make it again, and that it comes back around.
I'm really sorry to hear about what happened to you, and it's that is something that I worry about. There's always accidents that can happen. When we were driving around in this bus, I remember one night we were driving at night, going down the highway, and all of a sudden the headlights went out. We couldn't, it was really scary. Another time, a wheel fell off the bus when we were on the highway. We could have burned up. The danger is definitely out there. Maybe since you're here in Austin, you can get a fresh start. Nobody knows about what happened here, so try it again. Best of luck to you.
There's one more question in the back.
So, Peter and Joseph, you both mentioned collaborating with architects. So I was wondering how you decided to initiate those collaborations, if it was something you planned or sort of just happened, and how that affected your process.
I don't know if I worked with
She's probably mentioning the drawings that you had, the final couple slides, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was about to say that I had permission from some property owners to put the pictures, but not architects. Okay, so in terms of the collaboration, Daniel Alberto, he had graduated from UT. He was from El Paso. He came back, super motivated young man, and he just emailed my office about a pedestrian improvement project we were doing in a sort of university corridor, commercial corridor in El Paso in my district. And so he's like, I came up with these SketchUps, these things I'd like to show them to you. He said, all right. And then 2 days later, he shows up at my office with a laptop and a briefcase. He was that enthusiastic. And I was like, the project is 90% designed at this point. Like, these are really good, but there's, that project is done, and there was multiple public charrettes and the whole thing. But his attitude and his spirit really were like engaging. And so when February hit around and I wanted to do this monorail presentation, and a lot of it was the current administration is still having these discussions about a monumental border wall that will serve no justifiable use or positive value. It was important to show something different. And so I reached out to him and said, do you want to go to Juarez with me? I'm going to take some pictures. I'm going to show you this idea. And we collaborated like that. One of the things I gave to him, and it's online as well, is there was a monorail plan from 1965 to connect El Paso and Juarez. And so I gave him that primary document as a starting off point. But it really came to him knocking on the door and just being enthusiastic. I mean, I think that's one thing that that Joseph shows with that mural out there, was that you got to create the opportunity for yourself, whether that means emailing somebody or calling them or showing up at their office with something that you did, spec work, whatever. People respond well to positivity, and they respond well to passion.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how, that idea of working with architects is still kind of a work in progress for me. But, it is something that is a passion for me. I mean, when you look at this building, which is one of my favorite buildings in Austin, I can't imagine painting anything on it. The texture of these walls is so beautiful. I'm guessing it was hand made, or I don't know. But when I thought about architecture and murals through history, I just know that in all cultures and different times, all through history, you see buildings that have been painted, and I just feel like, well, that's got to be a possibility then. And I've, just started trying to meet architects and work with them. And, architects have it really tough, because what I've been hearing from them is, look, we have all these amazing ideas for beautiful buildings, but the developer doesn't want that. They just want this rectangle thing. So, they're having a hard time too, but, I think there's a possibility to work in that area of integrating art with architecture. And so I'm still trying to find architects and developers as well that share that same idea.
We have maybe one more, or okay. One more, and then final thoughts from Annette.
Y'all all seem relatively young, like you have a lot of career ahead of you, but is there anything that you've already done that you feel will be a part of your legacy?
bus thing is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely don't think about that, my legacy. Maybe when I'm like 70 or 80, hopefully. Okay, I will say that when I work on a project, I usually imagine that it's my last, and that makes me work that much harder to make it something special.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to go for that? No. Well, we want to thank all the artists for their participation. I want to thank them for their determination, for their undauntedness, for their commitment to what they do, and for the imagination that it's taken for them to just describe something new that they could be part of and be the creative genius behind. So thank you all so much for coming tonight and sharing.
Good evening, I'm Sylnovia Holt-Rab, Assistant Director with the City of Austin's Economic Development. Wasn't this phenomenal? Let's give them another big hand. I want to first thank the Mayor, City Council for supporting our department and our hardworking staff from Cultural Arts and Small Business and the Music Division. So when you leave, make sure you stop by their tables to get more information about their programs. And also, there's a survey. We would like for you to fill it out, give us some feedback on things that you're interested in hearing, panels you want us to present, and we will see what we can do to work those into our budget. But again, I love this, the energy in this room, and I want to thank you for your beautiful sketch. It's awesome. So again, let's give our panelists another round of applause. We hope that each of you leaves inspired, and please stay in touch with us, get on our mailing list so that, again, you can be informed of upcoming activities. And I bid you a good evening.